My name is Rick Baitz. He, him. My role is faculty member. I'm a core faculty member and former faculty chair. And I've been there since the very beginning, even before the beginning. We had our first meeting in 2010 about putting together the program. The first residency was in the summer of 2011, so I've been there ever since. From around 75 or 76 to until 1992, I taught, but then that was right at the time I started doing film music, and I decided to just devote myself completely to that. So I had been letting my teaching go, so I let it all go, and I was just doing film music. Before that, I was only doing concert music pretty much, and had just in 91 got a doctorate in composition from Columbia. But I didn't really want to use it for teaching. I wanted to use it for learning. I grew up in LA, but at the age of 14 moved to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with my family. My dad was transferred for business. And at 17 to South Africa. And those locations had a very, very powerful effect on me musically and otherwise, spiritually, psychologically, politically, every possible way. I saw this ad. They were actually looking for a chair for this new program that they were putting together at VCFA. And the way they described it, they were describing me. It was a program that would provide mentorship in not only all forms of contemporary classical composition, but film scoring and jazz composition and songwriting and electronic music. And that struck me in the heart because that is kind of where music as an art form is really going. So I thought it was a very, very creative model for a composition program. I didn't know any others in the country like that, like none, and I still don't. I mean, in a way, Cal Arts is one of the places that comes closest. I inquired about the chair position, but they actually already had someone basically offered me a position as faculty. So I first came in as faculty for the first year, and then Tamar left and they asked me to be chair, which I did for 4 years. So that was from 2012 to 2016. Okay, so that first meeting though that I attended, there were some faculty members there that are still around. And it was in Boston in someone's house. And we were just brainstorming on how this program was going to work. And so I don't remember too much about that meeting. Everybody was a little shy. I wasn't, but everybody else was. Carol Beatty was there, who was and still is our program director. And so I think it mostly just involved the nuts and bolts of what the residencies would look like and what the program would look like. So when the program first started, our first residency was in 2011. And what kind of makes this program unique at VCFA is that performances, or the way that our students' art actually manifests, happens in the residency. There are performances of student works that are in the residency. And so students work on a project and they work remotely with their mentor in between the residencies. We started the songwriter showcase because what I figured out was we needed a platform for all of the different genres to have, their space to express themselves. So we did the songwriter showcase. I started what I call the film, I used to call the Film Music Festival. Now it's called the Film and Media Music Festival, which is just a concert of students, really film scores. Faculty member John Malia followed up by starting the electronic music showcase. And so we had something for everybody. Soon somebody started a choral workshop. Later, Roger Zahab started the composer, performer, improviser we call the comproviser concert, which is for composers who improvise and also perform their own music. So it got built from just this very beginning of, having one ensemble to, and we also, I mean, it's like really challenging because these ensembles were playing a lot of pieces, and we finally had to limit it. When I was chair, we limited it to 12, but even that's too much because they don't have a lot of rehearsal time. They have like, at the most, 2 1-hour rehearsals. So we put together this, pretty amazing program, I think. I mean, I have studied many of the composition programs around the country, and I don't know any that do what we do. I mean, as I said, CalArts is about the closest. I looked at that very carefully, long before we have, affiliated with them. So that to me is a kind of marriage made in heaven, I think, I'm hoping. The art is open and expansive and inclusive and curious. And, if you look at visual arts, they don't call somebody who's a sculptor and somebody who's a painter and somebody who does performance art not an artist. They're all artists. They all might have even gone to the School of Visual Arts at one time or another, And well, it's the same with music. Somebody who's doing electronic music and incorporating rock and roll or Brazilian or African stuff like I do in my music, I actually, in fact, consider myself, which I'm so, I guess I'm so moved by the power of rhythm that I heard in Brazil as a 15-year-old, during Carnival, and the power of the drumming I heard in Africa as a 17-year-old, late at night, just hearing people playing. Actually, one time I was actually invited by these Zulu musicians to come sit with them while they were playing in basically in the jungle. They invited me to come sit with them because I had long hair. So this is during apartheid. It was quite a signifier for somebody who was not a racist, actually. But these are very, very powerful experiences, and I incorporate that into my music. And but I also consider myself part of a tradition, a very long and ancient tradition of quote unquote classical composers, whatever that means, but who use dance forms like Bartok and Copland, even Beethoven, even Bach wrote dance music, Stravinsky. So I'm part of that as well, using folkloric elements in my music, and I use jazz and rock and roll in my music. We get a really very diverse population coming to us. We've had people in their 80s and people in their early 20s in our program. People from all walks of life, people who come from the church, people who come from the military, people who've had careers in music but don't have a degree and want to teach, people who wanted to have a career in music but went in some other direction and then come back in middle age or even older or some point in their lives. So we all know that. Probably all of our programs are like that. And we get people, neurodiverse people. And then there's just this kind of magic between us as faculty. We're like a family. We have made decisions. We make our decisions on consensus, and we can disagree on things. But we basically all love each other, and it's an amazing celebration for 14 years to be coming back twice a year and hanging out in this intense environment together for 9 days. At some point during our program, have some kind of cathartic growth, and it's amazing to see. Like suddenly they come in with a piece of music and we're all going, oh my God, and sitting there with chills up our spine, like what happened to this person, but they realized it was okay to be weird, because weird is good, in being creative. What's weird? Look how weird Beethoven was, with his strange harmonies, and strange structures and stuff. There's a recent graduate, Ross, Ross, I forget his last name, Ross Burnett. And he was hanging around our program a lot. He's like this somewhat older, not necessarily older than me, but older, jazz musician. And I think Diane Mosier and he had played together, already functioning very professionally. But here he is, and he's coming to our residency. He finally, after like about 4 years of just coming to visit, he came and, so we have our presentations that the teachers do, and some of them are very geeky and technical and theoretical. We teach everything, we talk about, theory, music theory. It can even seem mathematical at times, even though it's not, but it can seem like it. Anyway, and he was writing interesting music, and then one day he just came in with this piece that I think it was called or had Anna the Ghost in the title. So I don't know who is watching this, but for those of you who don't know, College Hall is occupied by a ghost named Anna. And she shows up every once in a while. So Ross wrote this amazing piece for a big ensemble. I mean, it was probably, I think, a sextet. And it was made up of these movements like Anna is looking at you was one of them. I just remember that. But it was on such a high level. And so, yeah, I mean, oh my God, who did this person become? And there was another person, several years earlier, Beth Bradfish, who I had 1 year teaching at Columbia College, Chicago. That was when I first went back to teaching after almost 20 years of not teaching. She was my composition student there, and she is also an older woman. I would think she's in her 70s, and she was trying to really be a composer, and I eventually brought her to VCFA, where she studied mostly with John Malia, and she was learning electronics. And she came up with a piece, I think it was called Breathe. She actually recorded the ventilator it was her mother in the hospital at the end of her life, and recorded the ventilator and incorporated that. But it was this incredibly beautiful piece. And I have followed her and, stayed in touch with her, been to some of her installations and stuff. She started doing things like, she had a project in New York. She lives in Chicago, or she lived in Chicago. I think she lives in Wisconsin now, but she strung up a room on Governor's Island, which is now like an art space. She strung up a room with these strings with resonators on them. It's like a gigantic, trippy spider web that if you touch one of the strings, like all these sounds start happening. So she became herself. I think that there are some unknown synergies with Cal Arts that I think might really, really be exciting. Some of it's actually in a way starting, because as I described to you, we have ensembles that play student works. So we created an ensemble for the next residency that is from LA, and I believe it's a sextet, and I think 4 or 5 of them actually are Cal Arts graduates. There's a kind of aesthetic difference there. I mean, they can do everything that people on the East Coast can do, and vice versa. But there's it's more LA. It's more improvisation oriented, and I mean, it's interesting. I'm just waiting and watching and just seeing what kind of synergy we might be able to build, with the California community. I know musicians out there also. It's an amazing community, actually. I mean, as a film composer, I do film and I do concert music. I do both. I'm a hybrid. I'm in both worlds, and my concert music is all over the place. The piece I'm writing now has a lot of jazz influence, but also like sort of Stravinsky influences. I don't know. When I go out there for anything having to do with work, I also find like I have a tribe there. It's interesting. Maybe I'm multi-tribal, but I have the tribe of musicians out there who are just incredible musicians. So, I think that we'll be able to maybe connect with the California community now more and see where that takes us. Thank you for being you and for, the closeness and acceptance that we all share with each other and the creative inspiration that we all derive from each other. And, I think that I am definitely a beneficiary of that configuration very much. And it's appreciated. And I know you all feel the same way. So, we've got something great happening, and we'll keep it going. It's slightly intangible, but it's much more than an MFA, because I think it's life transformative, and that never leaves you, and it goes with you in whatever you do. And it helps you make decisions later in life. I mean, I sort of experienced that before coming to VCFA. At Tanglewood, I was a fellow at Tanglewood, and the first time I went to an artist colony, Yaddo, just in Saratoga Springs, and saw how was around other artists, some of whom were much older and successful and famous, but I saw how artists live. And it gave me a model for how to live as an artist. And in fact, here you see me right now in this studio. I have to have a studio, and I go there every day. And I think that VCFA, you can't describe what it's going to do. It's always a surprise because it's real. It can't really be planned. People do come to VCFA not just for the MFA, but because they want to find their own voice. And but however that happens, it's the kind of thing that happens the way you don't expect it. So if you want a life change that you can't describe and you don't expect, come to VCFA.